Welcome back to the Oscar Project Podcast, the show where I discuss Oscar-nominated films year by year. I am your host, Jonathan Eacherberg, and today I'm coming to you with a bit of an update episode due to some recent events. As most people know, there have been a number of wildfires ravaging the greater Los Angeles area over the last 2 weeks, killing nearly 30 people and destroying thousands of homes and businesses. So many people have been displaced as a result of this disaster, and since I focus on movies here on the podcast, it obviously affects what I do. But I wanted to take a brief moment to share some resources that you can use if you are affected by these fires, or if you just want to help those who have been affected. As with any disaster, you can always donate to places like the American Red Cross, either with funds or by giving a blood donation. The Salvation Army also has a donation page on their website dedicated specifically to wildfire assistance. And just yesterday, a number of musical artists including Billie Eilish, Dave Matthews, Green Day, Katy Perry, Sting, Rod Stewart, Lady Gaga, and more have committed to a benefit concert that will be held on January 30th. You can check out information for that concert and donate today at fireaidla.org. One more resource I want to mention is the Will Rogers Motion Picture Pioneers Foundation. This organization has been offering assistance to those in the movie distribution industry and those working for movie theaters who might be affected by the fires. The effects of these fires are far-reaching, and we all need to do our part to help those in need. We see stories of celebrities who have lost their homes, but there are thousands more who need help and don't have the visibility of those stars. I'll include a link to all of these resources and more in the show notes for this episode. I also wanted to provide a brief update on the schedule of the podcast that has shifted a bit due to the fires. As awards bodies have moved nomination dates and ceremony dates because of the developing situation, one date that was initially affected was the Oscar nominee announcement, which was scheduled to take place this morning. As of this recording, that is still scheduled to take place next Thursday, January 23rd, so be on the lookout for a short episode next Thursday with some immediate reactions to that announcement. My next Oscar movie episode, which was scheduled for next Friday, will actually move up in the schedule and come to you next Tuesday instead. Then, assuming there are no further date changes around the Oscars, I will resume the normal schedule the following Tuesday. Lastly, since this was a short episode, I wanted to add one more piece. Yesterday, we sadly learned of the passing of the great director David Lynch, and I wanted to share with you part of an interview I did with Ian Nathan back in the fall of 2023. We talked about his book that he wrote about Lynch, and here is some of that interview. One of the questions I asked you when you were on talking about Clint Eastwood was about his connection between jazz and his films. And Lynch seems to have a similar focus on film and art, and oftentimes even film as art. How do you think things like painting and sculpture have informed Lynch's films over the years?
Well, I think in simple terms, if you were asking this question of David Lynch, he would say they were all the same thing. They were just sort of extensions of one another. The famous story is that the reason he even got into filmmaking was that he was painting, he was at art college in Philadelphia. And he had this idea, he had this kind of feeling about a wind, these kind of very Lynchian kind of images. And he wanted his painting to move. He wanted a moving painting. So he started to explore that as an artistic expression. He incorporated visual elements into his paintings that were moving, animation, sort of elements that would extend beyond the static canvas into a living format. And that grew finally into filmmaking itself, that he realized that he would be able to express those artistic desires, the kind of the muse that he had best or most distinctively if he had a full-scale moving picture to do it with. And that became film. Starts with Eraserhead, but he would tell you that every one of his films has carried on that very idea. So indeed, his films are paintings and they are sculptures.
You mentioned it a moment ago, and the book takes Lynch's films roughly in chronological order, starting obviously with Eraserhead, which I think you call the source code for everything else he's made. How did that film help establish his methods and his style of film?
I think what Eraserhead did for him was show him the way he could make sense of the images in his head. And in some ways, even though it was made on a microscopic budget and it took something like 4 years to finish and really took the help of friends and colleagues and was this kind of bizarre, long-winded journey in which he was virtually doing a few frames a day, it was the best experience of his career, certainly in terms of film, because he had the utmost control over it. He was down there. He was, as I sort of said, he's sculpting props and images. He was setting the scene up exactly how he wanted it. And I think what Eraserhead gives him, certainly on a kind of technical level, is this idea of what he would need to manage across a production to express the things he wanted to express. To tell a David Lynchian story, he would need this kind of utmost control. In fact, that's one of the dilemmas that comes up with the films you might say didn't work as well for him, his dalliances in Hollywood, because he wasn't able to have that kind of utmost control. It's not really even auteur theory, it's beyond that. It's a sense of absolutely pouring what was in his mind straight out into the film. But also Eraserhead sets up so many of the themes and character styles and the overall kind of gothic mood of the Lynchian work. It's set in a slightly alternate universe. It's a weird kind of nightmare cityscape. It's filmed in Los Angeles, but was largely based on his experiences living very poorly in Philadelphia while he was at art school. Those things were mixed together. And that idea of cities as sort of mental spaces arises in Eraserhead. And of course, the film is a riddle. It's about an incredibly anxious character who is a cipher for Lynch himself, coming to terms with a kind of child he's fathered, and all the kind of strange angst and the way that echoes outwards into dreams really sort of sets the mold or the style of what we think of as Lynchian.
Right, and you've used the term Lynchian several times already here, and you use it throughout the book to describe his style. And of course, I was surprised to see at the end of the book you left it as a little bit of a cliffhanger as to the true meaning of that word. But what do you think that word Lynchian means, and how do you know when something deserves to be called Lynchian?
Well, you happen upon the kind of the central sort of quest of the film, of the book, and the thing I set out to do, and the hardest thing of all to describe, is what is Lynchian? What is his work? It's many things, and it's things I probably couldn't describe. I think it was described by one critic. I use this quote that is impossible to put down in words, but you know it when you see it. Sure. There are elements of film noir. There are elements of horror. There are sort of elements of his background in painting and surrealism, his desire to use dream logic as maybe the biggest brushstroke he has. There is a determination to set up riddles and puzzles for the viewer and not interpret them and not give an answer to them, because he wants the viewer to have their own interpretations. His argument is that if he tells you what he thinks Eraserhead means, or what Blue Velvet ultimately means, or what Mulholland Drive works out to be, he would end the debate over his films. He'd bring a halt to what we think of, or our own processes of interpretation, because that's the most important thing in the Lynchian world. Is it's not the answer, it's the questioning. It's our own journey within those films.
Sure.
And I think that's what ultimately Lynchian is. It's the unanswered questions.
I'm sure as people revisit and discover Lynch's films in the wake of his passing, they will continue to find more of those unanswered questions. You can find the full interview with Ian in this podcast feed back in October of 2023, and I'll have a link to the episode in the show notes as well. If you want to stay up to date on all things Oscar-related, please head over to theoscarproject.substack.com and sign up for the newsletter. You'll receive reviews, weekly previews of coming movies every Thursday, and access to contests and challenges throughout the year. Don't forget to subscribe to the show in your podcast player so you can get all the newest episodes as soon as they're released, and leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or Spotify. The Oscar Project podcast is written and produced by me, Jonathan Eacherberg, with editing assistance from Joshua Eacherberg. Be sure to come back for my next episode, where I will be discussing the 1927 film Underworld. Until then, I hope to see you at the movies.